When I first met Jason, my life felt like it was falling into place. He was charming, attentive, and made me feel safe in a way I hadn't experienced before. Life had been hard over the past few years, moving to a new city, adjusting to my career, and most of all, dealing with the sudden loss of my parents. My dog, Bailey, had been the one constant through it all, offering me unconditional love and companionship. Bailey, a gentle golden retriever I'd adopted when she was a puppy, was my everything. So when Jason came into my life, I felt like things were finally getting back on track. Bailey wasn't just a pet, she was family. Every morning she would jump onto my bed, her tail wagging with excitement for the new day. And every night she'd rest her head on my lap as I watched TV or scrolled through my phone. Jason quickly understood how important she was to me. Or at least, I thought he did. It wasn't long before Jason moved in with me. Everything seemed perfect at first. He made me feel appreciated, and Bailey seemed to enjoy his company, too. Jason even took on some of the responsibilities of caring for her, like taking her for walks and feeding her when I had long work days. It felt like I had finally found a partnership where everything clicked. But then, things started to change. It wasn't obvious at first, just little things that I brushed off as Jason getting adjusted to living with a dog. He started making comments about Bailey's behavior, claiming she was too needy or that she followed me around too much. I remember laughing it off at first. Of course, she was a little clingy. That's how she had always been, especially after everything we had been through together. But Jason's complaints slowly escalated, and I started noticing changes in Bailey, too. He seemed more withdrawn, less excited to greet me when I came home. Her once bright eyes seemed dull, and he no longer jumped on the bed in the mornings. I chalked it up to her getting older. After all, he wasn't a puppy anymore, but something about her behavior felt off. Jason assured me that he was taking care of her, saying she was probably just adjusting to having him around. He'd tell me that Bailey was being well-fed and exercised, and that maybe I was imagining things. I wanted to believe him, so I did. I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid, that Bailey was fine, and that Jason had everything under control. Then, there was the day my neighbor, Mrs. Harrison, approached me. She was a sweet woman in her 60s who lived next door, always tending to her garden or waving at me as I left for work. I didn't think much of it when she stopped me outside one afternoon, but her expression was different, concerned, almost hesitant. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something," she started, fidgeting with the gardening gloves in her hands. She went on to tell me that she had seen Jason with Bailey in the backyard while I was at work. She noticed that he seemed frustrated with Bailey, sometimes yanking her leash or yelling at her when she wouldn't obey his commands. She told me that it didn't sit right with her, and she thought I should know. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jason had never shown any signs of mistreating Bailey when I was around. He was always calm and patient with her, or so I thought. But Mrs. Harrison had no reason to lie, and her concerns seemed genuine. My mind raced with questions. Was Jason really treating Bailey this way when I wasn't around? Could this explain why she seemed so different lately? That night, I confronted Jason, but not in the way you might think. I didn't ask him directly about what Mrs. Harrison had told me. Instead, I watched him more closely. I paid attention to how he interacted with Bailey when he thought I wasn't watching. I noticed how quick he was to lose his patience with her, how he'd scold her for minor things, like barking at the door or following me into the kitchen. His tone was sharp, almost harsh, and it made my stomach turn. The more I watched, the more I realized that Mrs. Harrison was right. Jason was not the man I thought he was. He was kind and loving to me. But with Bailey, it was a different story. She became more withdrawn each day, her once vibrant energy dimming before my eyes. I could no longer ignore what was happening. One evening, after a particularly tense moment between Jason and Bailey, I decided to act. I asked him about his frustrations with her, and he brushed it off, saying she was just too much to handle sometimes. But his dismissive attitude only confirmed what I had feared. He didn't care for Bailey the way I did. The final straw came when I caught him in the act. I had come home from work early, something Jason hadn't expected. As I walked into the house, I heard him in the backyard, his voice raised in frustration. I peeked through the window and saw him yanking Bailey's leash, pulling her toward the door with such force that she whimpered. My heart broke in that moment. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But there it was, right in front of me. I stepped outside, my hands trembling with anger and disbelief. Jason froze when he saw me, the leash still tight in his grip. I didn't need to say anything. The look on my face said it all. After that, I couldn't look at him the same way. How could I? The man I had trusted, the man I had loved, had been lying to me all along. He had been hurting the one being who had stood by my side through everything, and I hadn't seen it. I ended things with Jason soon after. It wasn't easy. But I knew I couldn't be with someone who could mistreat an innocent creature, especially one I loved so deeply. Bailey was part of my family, and anyone who couldn't respect that didn't deserve to be in my life. It took time for Bailey to heal, both physically and emotionally. She slowly returned to her old self, her eyes brightening again, her tail wagging with excitement when I came home. It was as if she knew that the darkness that had clouded our home was gone. As for Jason, I never saw him again after he moved out. I heard through mutual friends that he had moved to another city, but I didn't care to know more. My focus was on Bailey and making sure she never had to experience that kind of treatment again. Looking back, I realized how blind love can make you. I wanted so badly for things to be perfect, to believe that Jason was the man I thought he was. But in the end, the truth always comes out, and I'm grateful to Mrs. Harrison for showing me what I couldn't see on my own. Bailey and I are still together, just the two of us, and I wouldn't have it any other way. She's my constant, my rock, and I'll never let anyone come between us again. Looking back on everything, I can't help but feel a heavy heart. Jason didn't just lie to me about his feelings toward Bailey. He lied about who he truly was. Love can blind you, make you miss the things that are right in front of you. But the truth, no matter how painful, always finds a way to come out. And though it hurts, it brings freedom. After Jason left, it wasn't just Bailey who needed to heal. I did too. The wounds in my heart ran deeper than I had realized. Every time I looked into Bailey's eyes, I saw a part of myself, hurt, but still hopeful. She had survived her pain, and so would I. There were nights when I sat beside her, gently stroking her soft fur as tears silently streamed down my face. Every tear was a farewell to the relationship I thought would last forever, and a quiet apology to Bailey for not protecting her sooner. But Bailey never blamed me. Her eyes were always soft, always forgiving, and always filled with unconditional love. That was the greatest lesson she taught me. True love doesn't need words, promises, or explanations. It exists in the simplest moments, in the way she curled up next to me each night, or the way she gently licked my hand when I felt my worst. As time passed, things got better. Bailey found her joy again, and I rediscovered myself. Our home was no longer filled with tension and anxiety. It became a real sanctuary once more. Just me and Bailey, two hearts that had weathered the storm together. Sometimes I wonder if Jason ever feels regret, if he thinks about me and Bailey, about the moments when we were a small family. But then I realize that it doesn't matter anymore, because I've learned that no one has the right to make you feel guilty for loving someone, even if that someone is a dog. Bailey isn't just my companion. She's taught me that real love doesn't have to be complicated. And sometimes, the simplest forms of love bring the greatest peace. I still cherish those afternoon walks with Bailey, watching her bound across the grass, her tail wagging fiercely as if to declare her happiness. And I know, as long as I have Bailey by my side, I'll be okay. We've made it through everything, and no matter where life takes us, I'll always protect and love her the way she's loved me. A love without words, without conditions, but one that endures forever.